Hey, welcome back, everyone. Excited about this week's episode. We are going to be talking about having purpose in your organization and why it'll help you to win. Want to say thank you first to all of our sponsors, Northbeam, Postscript, and Fulfill. We couldn't do this without you. So without further ado, Matt and I talking about purpose.
So one of the founders of Fulfill actually reached out via Twitter DM saying he said he could potentially help us with an issue. And we weren't actually looking to even move ERPs. And it turned out they had something called channel scripts, which is really huge for our business. It let us transform our orders after they were placed and basically modify them so they have the correct BOM and a few other things for production after. And that made a huge difference in our business. That was an immediate 5 figures to our bottom line. And it let us kind of free up about 6 people we had that were working on fixing issues downstream from that. So that was a big win. And then we love their pick and pack module, which is really, really good too. It's pretty rare for an ERP to have a good pick and pack module. Most of the time we end up having to kind of rip that out and replace it with something else. So it was nice having everything all in one.
This is a good topic for you and I, not for Mr. Panzer. If he's going to listen to this, I'm just going to call him out now. Having purpose, Mike. So like the business has a purpose beyond just making money. Why did you want to talk about this?
So I think this is a really interesting one for a couple different reasons. The first is that, you hear people, I guess, complaining, kind of lamenting all the time that they can't attract talent. And it's a very competitive, hiring space. How do I get the best people? The best teams have the best people. So if you're just competing on comp in today's global economy, then you need to pay top dollar to get the best people, or you need to have something else, some kind of other way that you're bringing value to the table, some kind of other offer. And my sense in building Simple Modern has been having a really clear sense of mission and purpose that's compelling to people is worth a lot when you're competing and trying to attract the best talent and retain the best talent. I think it brings the best work out of people. So having a clear mission, I think, matters on forming the team, keeping the team together, what the team does, how you lead the team. But then there's this other piece of it that I think is really significant, which is when you start a business, when you're leading a business, obviously you're trying to get personally something out of it. And okay, you want to get an income. Sure, I want to get an income out of my business. But if all I get out of my business is an income, I don't think I'm going to be fully satisfied. That for me, even personally, it matters quite a bit what I feel like I'm building and what I'm accomplishing. We all want to feel like that all the work that we're putting in the building is worth something, that somehow you're impacting the world, somehow you're leaving a mark or a legacy. And so I think even on a personal level, it's really impacted my ability to lead, my longevity, my consistency. So my perspective, I get asked to speak a lot about this topic, Matt, in different contexts. And I think as a culture, we are more starved for leaders that have a really clear sense of purpose than ever before. And that people will just flock to leaders that really are willing to put a flag in the ground and say, hey, this is what we're standing for and this matters. So it's just a great topic to talk about if you're building a business on both those fronts.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the retention piece. So like, I've heard this talked about a lot, like attracting talent, having strong purpose or strong mission, right? Mission-oriented business. It's great for attracting talent, but the retention piece doesn't get spoken about enough. And especially for the founder. Like I can speak from experience that having some kind of mission beyond just I'm here to make a buck has helped with like really hard times.
Yeah,
So like when
absolutely.
things just feel awful, like, okay.
Well, when things are hard, our natural tendency, my natural tendency is to run away, right? My natural tendency anytime things are hard, and this doesn't matter whether you're talking about a friendship or
Sure.
marriage or your business, like it's just people get flighty when things get hard. And if you don't have a really clear sense of purpose outside of, we're just here to kind of grow the bottom line. Well, what about the year that the bottom line goes down 30%? And I think you're absolutely right. Not just even with the team out there, but with me, what gives me kind of personal endurance. So I have this theory that basically we always have to have some kind of way of evaluating how am I doing,
Mhm.
and that without a compelling purpose, the lowest common denominator that people will just default to is how much money did we make?
Yep.
But if that's the only thing motivating your behavior, then you're basically a mercenary at that point. And like you said, anytime that's not going well, you're going to be like, I need to get out. I need to better deal this. And this is exactly the way that employees can be also. So maybe a good place to start, Matt, because I know this is really ingrained in your company. Why don't you tell me about both your companies really have this common thread of purpose? How would you describe the mission or purpose of Lomi and Pillowcase?
Create a waste-free future.
Yeah.
That's it.
And why is that? Why are you so passionate about that?
You know what's funny? I don't know that I'm super passionate about the create a waste-free future part. I'm really passionate about the disrupting traditional waste management and like the existing systems. So I come at it and I kind of tell my team this, like, it doesn't matter how you come at it. Like that's the thing with when we set out to build sort of like a vision and a mission for the business and we settled on this, like, let's create a waste-free future. The thing we repeatedly tell the team is, it's up for interpretation, right? Like when Elon Musk did Tesla, I think was transition the world to renewable energy for a car company. It's big and it's nebulous, but it allows people to like adopt it in their own way. So for me, it shows up more in the like I don't like the way things are done now across a number of vectors, and I think there can be a better way. For some people on our team, it's genuinely like they just believe that there should be no waste. Like you can live life this way. So it really depends. For us, I would agree. I think it's been really important in attracting talent. I will say it's also, dude, it's weirdly important in trying to increase TAM and figuring out like how do you actually position, like not as a,
Yeah.
a lead thing, but like how are you going to build a longevity in a brand over time? And I think that's
It's
that's a
man,
big
that's
part of
such a
it.
good point. Like the if all your business is doing is just saying, how do we make more money? Then the opportunities you say yes to can often just be rabbit trails that you should not be pursuing. That clear mission becomes like the decoder ring to look at any growth opportunity
Yep.
and make a decision of, is this something that is worth pursuing for this organization? Otherwise, it does become like, can we make money doing it? And you can end up doing like, this is where you get these companies that have 5 or 6 different business units that don't seem to fit together at all.
Right.
It was just a pursuit of, well, we think we can make a little bit of money doing this, and we think we can make a little bit of money doing that. And you put it all together, and you're like, the sum of these parts doesn't make any sense. So I've liked that aspect of it, that it bounds kind of like the opportunity set that we're looking at. It helps. I guess another way of saying this is it creates focus.
Yeah.
And
Focus for sure. Governance. Like it
yeah,
does allow you like judgment, with team. So like team, I think stakeholders, just like people who work for you, the families involved, your investors, your board members, your customers. Like these are all kind of like stakeholders in a business, and having something where you've like put a flag in the ground and just said like we're going to behave this way. Like this is something that we believe in, and that we're going to use the outcomes of this business to pursue that belief. Right.
so I wanna dig some more on your personal, like, involvement in this mission. Did you have some kind of, like, a seminal moment or something that informed being like, "Man, the system is broken, and I wanna be a part of changing that?"
Well, so with okay, so like I'll give you both. So with Pila Case, I think I've mentioned this. Like I was the first outside investor in that company. I didn't start it. My business partner Jeremy, he invented the product. I saw the material, and I'm like, this is pretty rad. What else can we do with this? I didn't really care that it was a phone case at the time. Like I
Right.
didn't know anything about the category. Just all I thought was like, this is back in 2016, 2017. So like the plastic in the ocean crisis was kind of like heating up. And I just thought like as a person who loves being outside, in every manner and every activity. I like this. Like, this makes me feel
Yeah.
good if we can like make this a thing. So it was really selfish. Like, it felt good, right? And that was that was my big realization at
Good
that time.
missions always have both, I think.
Yes.
They have an aspect of, hey, this is good and this feels good, because just like I don't know that anybody does anything out of 100% altruism.
No.
Like, and the good news is, I think as humans, we're actually wired that we're wired where when we do the good thing, it feels good also. There's these feedback loops, and it actually does improve our quality of life. It's just like hardwired in the way that we work. But it's a great point to make that anytime somebody says there's nothing in it for me, it's like, okay, that's a huge red flag, right? It's like, okay, you're a
That doesn't
liar.
check,
Yeah.
like, not at all.
No.
Like, even so for Lomi, uh, again, selfish. You probably don't have this where you live, Mike, but here in Canada, in all of our major cities, we have for maybe like 20 years had these things called green bin programs where you separate out your food waste, you put it in a little plastic bin, you stick it under your sink, and then once a week, you have to like empty it into a bigger one in your garage, and then you put that out at the curb. So we've been doing this for decades up here. It's coming to a channel near you in the US. Like, it's basically going to be everywhere in the US. Growing up in Ontario, in Toronto specifically, which is the raccoon capital of the world, didn't know if you knew that.
Do you have bears also?
Not in Toronto. Here I got
Okay.
bears. So
Really?
yeah, we've just got animals. There's a lot of land and not a lot of people. So that damn green bin program, once a month, I would get up in the morning to go to work, and the bin had been ripped open, and like all of my rotting food is now all over my driveway and my yard. And when it came time to like when we were sort of in this like ideation process around Lomi, that was my motivating factor. I'm like, I've lived with this awful system that was just, I didn't have a choice in it. It was just given to me by like local government. Um, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Like, this is some part of
Mhm.
home life that I looked at that and thought, like, I feel like a bit of a held hostage around trash. Like, it's just something I got to do. I don't like it. It smells out my kitchen. Like, there was just a bunch of very like personal things that we looked at that, and I'm like, I would like to solve this problem for me, like for myself.
Right.
So, and then it fits really well into our broader like mission and vision, like as a company. Because at that time it was just one company. We didn't realize that Lomi would become such a big thing and that would need to be its own business.
Mm.
That's why they're the common tie is the waste thing, because Lomi started inside of Pila Case. It existed there for the first like 12 months of
Oh,
its
really?
life. Yeah.
Okay. I did not know that.
We didn't spin it
So
out.
it was spun out. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We spun it out. But you're right. I think the whole idea of showing up for something greater than you isn't enough. Like, you still have to have the carrot. You still have to have the like, no, there's got to be personal reward in this. And I think that even shows up with customers. If you talk to a bunch of our friends, which I have, most of them will tell you, and they're right, that a customer is not going to buy your product for your mission alone.
Yeah.
It's not because it's not about you. Like, it's
Yeah.
not about your
This
business's purpose and
100% right.
mission. Like, it's about the product and what it can do for that person or how they feel it would do something for them. So it's sort of one of the traps too, is like, if you lead too heavy with the mission and the purpose, it can be a little tricky. Like,
Yeah.
you still have to sort of like lead with a great product or a great solution, and then underpin it and support it with the mission. Put another way, no margin, no mission is something that we
Mhm.
say a lot. You're still a business first. Like, I had a friend who's just a brilliant entrepreneur, funny enough, built data centers, made all of his money there. But we were on a cat skiing trip one year, and he flat out asked me, he's like, if it came right down to it, what would you pick, the business or the mission? And I'm like, fuck, okay, the business. He's like, why? Well, like, without the business, there is no mission. So like, the business has
Mm.
to come first.
Okay,
And
so you just so many good things you said right there. One I want to focus on because you know that I teach in addition to the other stuff I do. And so I've spent a lot of time around college students over the last, let's say, 7 or 8 years. In a business context, I teach entrepreneurship classes. And one of the things that is very interesting to students is we have a company that's very focused on giving back. And that is, I would say, very on trend for the way that people that are students that are wanting to go into entrepreneurship. They're very motivated by this idea of that you're impacting the world in a positive way through business, that giving is a part of it. And I feel like half the business models I see, it's like, hey, we're going to do this thing, and we're for every, one we sell, we're going to give a book to the homeless, or we're going to, give a meal, or, whatever. And the thing that I have noticed in all of these kind of business plans is that they really focus on the giving piece, and they're really light on like practically how they're going to acquire customers.
Yeah.
And so what's become obvious to me is that they think that's going to do the customer acquisition for them. And it just simply will not. Like we are really engaged in giving. I would guess that like from companies our size, we probably have given more than almost any company our size over the last couple of years. But that is not primarily why customers buy our products.
No.
I think what I have learned is that if a customer buys your product based on the merit of your products and then finds out that your mission is something that they get excited about, that it is like this force multiplier on the way they think about your brand. So It's like, I buy this water bottle, man, this was great. What I got for the money, the quality, this is awesome. Oh, wait. So they're giving money towards clean drinking water. Well, I'm passionate about that. Well, okay. I don't just like this company now. I love this company.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually going to tell other people about why they should buy this stuff. And now I'm going to go and buy 4 more, for my cabinets. And that's actually where it really becomes important, is it kind of deepens the brand affinity for people when you have a really compelling mission that stacks on top of a compelling product. But the way that I'll communicate this to students is I'm like, basically, don't talk to me about your giving initiative until you have a good business plan, because it doesn't matter. And the phrase I like to use, you said it really well, no profit, no mission, no business, no mission. A way that I say it is you earn the right to be idealistic. That we're able to be super idealistic about how we use the money because we are excellent at running the business, because we're profitable. And that makes all the difference in the world.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Operator's Northbeam ad unit. So 30 seconds, I'm going to tell you all about how if you have any problems with Northbeam, you can directly message Austin, the CEO. He is there. He will set up your ad account. He will make your bet. He'll give you cookies. Really, they have a dedicated team of people, probably 30, 40, 50 reps at this point, who will make sure Northbeam is working correctly and functioning so you can get amazing data out of this ecosystem. They will be more hands-on than any meta rep will ever be, and they're going to help you understand where your ad dollars are best spent, best positioned, and which ads are working. My team works with the Northbeam team literally every day. They're in my Slack. Maybe you don't get the same level of support as an operator, but they will be there to make sure it's working. And if you're not happy at all, just email Austin. He will take care of you. We use Northbeam every day. It's a benchmarking tool. It's super helpful for forecasting, daily pacing, inter-hour pacing. So we can see like if we just launched an ad in 2 hours, if it's working or not. That's what Northbeam does for us. So thank you, Northbeam, for the support. I'm customer probably number 1. So thank you so much.
Well, one thing to add regarding Northbeam, because we just went through a contract renewal with them on their specifically on the MMM. And we got a pretty sweetheart deal, and I expect them to come back to us and raise our price, and they kind of deserve it. I was like, let me reach out to the team, and see how it's going, right? Because I'm not in the day to day. I get feedback, and the team was like, they have improved the MMM so much since we started it that they were like, we should definitely pay for this increase. So. And my team hates every agency and most SaaS. The only person that hates SaaS, the only more than my team is Sean, Frank. But yeah, I mean, they came to us. They're like, hey, you guys got the sweetheart deal. We were one of the first MMM clients. And I was very, very pleased when my team was like, it's really working well for us. So that's my little MMM plug.
I got 2 points on this. So the first is it's far more important for loyalty than it is for acquisition. Like, I think I couldn't agree more with that. Like,
Absolutely.
it's not the reason they're going to take the first step, but it is the reason those customers are going to take the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Like, they will go deeper when you show up in a way that they're just not expecting, right? Like, when somebody buys something, if you think of it from like a typical consumer experience, like most of what you buy in life is extremely transactional. I have a problem, I have a need, I have a want, I buy the thing, done. Very few interactions with, particularly with brands, do they come with something greater than like, you simply gave me the thing. That's why, like, you saw for a long time in consumer, the handwritten note was so popular. And then, we at Pila, we pioneered this idea of like, every time somebody would buy a phone case, one of my team members would record a video and send a thank you video to that person. We even built like a whole software system that allowed us to like batch these things up. And then eventually we're like, okay, this is getting insane. We do like 1,000 orders a day, 2,000 orders a day. Can't record that many videos. We started matching names. We're like, well, how many Matts are there in the world? Every time a Matt comes in, send in the Matt video. So we started to like figure out, how do you like scale up this, like, we want to show you that we care thing. And that's just another way that we would connect with customers. So that's point one, is like, it's about step 2, 3, 4. Don't get them confused, right? And that goes with the business model. That goes with hiring. It's going to be more powerful in retention than it is in acquisition of talent. Like, it just goes up and down the stack. Okay, point one. Point two, one of the things that's worked for us, I think, as a business, is I'm a pretty like hardcore red-blooded capitalist and a marketer. So while we recruit people, and we tend to get a lot of people who want to come work with us because of how we show up in the world, for
Right.
sure. When they get here, it's sort of like a bit of a shock about how much I actually care about performance.
You're not a
Right?
nonprofit.
No, we're not a nonprofit. And I've had to repeat that. I've actually had people leave the company because I draw the line there, that like, this is not okay. Like, we actually have to make a profit. There needs to be margin. It's how we actually make an impact. But most of my marketing team, I would say like early days marketing team on Pila Case, were shocked at how direct response and how, I guess, like marketing heavy we were as a business. Like, I wouldn't do anything activity wise that wouldn't further people finding out about the brand and the product.
Yeah.
And that blew people
Well,
away.
some of this goes back, I think, Matt, to just one of the thought processes that's out there that I pretty strongly disagree with is this kind of humanism thought process that people are all pretty good and are in it for the good, and it's like, generally, I think people, like, we're pretty selfish.
Yep.
And that we're pretty self-interested, and that, like you're saying, like, it would be great. It would be great if people wanted to buy Pila or wanted to buy Lomi just because they really care about, the
Sure.
planet, or, the fact that they love skiing and they want people to be able to enjoy skiing like that 50 or 100 years from now. But we just know that's not how people think, right? And we have to sell them on how this makes your life better. But then, like you're saying, people love it when you're able to say, this is how this makes your life better. And also, you can feel good about it because it makes these other impacts. So another interesting kind of point that you made, that I talk to a lot of nonprofits. So we give to, I think we've given to over 1,000 organizations between product donation and monetary donations. We've given to over 1,000 organizations, and I haven't talked to all of them, but I've talked to many of them. And what's interesting is the very best nonprofits right now actually still have a capitalistic perspective. They're kind of social entrepreneurship is what I would call it. So I'll give it a good example. We work with a water charity, Water For, and what they do is they raise money to go in and build wells in places like Uganda. But then the community basically takes possession of these wells as a business.
Yep.
The wells, I mean, the water's not expensive. It's very inexpensive, but they sell the water, and then that provides for the upkeep of the well, which this is a big problem in water wells, is that the wells don't get kept up, and they fund more wells. And so you get this capitalistic mechanism within this nonprofit, And it's incredibly effective, incredibly powerful. So I think that you even in the nonprofit world, you need to have these kind of perspectives in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. But the biggest thing, I came out of the nonprofit world. I worked there for 10 years. I was in full-time ministry. And when I first came into the for-profit world, I think that I thought about margin almost as a bad word. Like margin was
Yeah.
proof you were taking advantage of somebody. And listen, there's a lot of people out there that think this way, And what I realized is margin is potential. Margin is the fuel for positive change. Margin enlarges the future. It makes it possible for us to do the kind of changes and reform and improvements that society needs. And so I've had my view on margin totally transformed, I would say over about a 10-year period, from where I kind of felt a little bit guilty when our margins were healthy to when our margins are healthy. That is so encouraging to me, not just because the business is financially healthy, but because that's a lot of fuel to do a lot of things that are meaningful. And anyway, so how your company thinks about margin and why you seek margin, I think actually matters quite a bit.
What do you think about this? I feel like I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the last like 2-3 years, there's a very loud opposition to this idea of like a business with purpose, right? It tends to show up with like in political cycles. You had like Vivek coming out saying like ESG is just the devil's child when it comes to business. Like a business's only function is to make a profit for its shareholders. It shouldn't be muddling about anything else. That is the land for nonprofits, right? Like if you,
so I have a take on this.
Can you give me your take? I'm curious.
The take is that what people dislike more than almost anything else is duplicity. That we have to spend our whole life interacting with other people where we've got limited sample sizes, and our brains are developed so that with limited signals, I can kind of get to a point of, do I trust you? Do I believe you? Are you safe? And so we really dislike it when someone is messaging one thing, but they're actually another, because that makes them unsafe. Like it triggers something in our brain that's like a red flashing light that's like warning. And if you look at the corporate kind of quote unquote giving mission purpose sphere, I think the average person says it's BS. It's totally corporate speak, that they don't really care about X, Y, and Z, that they're just doing this to try and get people to shop at their stores or to prevent them being taxed at a higher level or being regulated or whatever else. They're not doing this because they care. They're doing this simply because they think this is how they get the most money. And so as a result, people have become pretty cynical, I think, that anybody in business who's virtue signaling, anybody who in business is saying, I'm going to make this kind of, difference in the world, I don't think so. I think they just want a bigger yacht and they think this is the best messaging. So, and listen, sadly, there's plenty of examples of this being true. One of the more interesting kind of ideas to me. So sociopaths, I can't remember the percentage. I'm going to look this up right now. What percentage of the population do you think is sociopathic?
Isn't it like there's 10% of men?
Yeah. Let's see here. What percentage of people are sociopaths? It's whatever it was. Okay, 4.5%.
Okay, there you go.
So
I knew it was a bigger
what
number
that
than I
means,
thought it was.
A sociopath basically just does not, process the world and think about the world the way that the way that everybody else does, and their motivation, the way that they process things, it's very different. The interesting thing about sociopaths to me is that where sociopaths tend to want to work, because they want to hide this aspect of them that they don't feel or process the way other people do. And where sociopaths will way over index? They way over index in the nonprofit world.
Really?
And yes, it's hiding in plain sight. Like Gus Fring in Breaking Bad, he talks about how he's hiding in plain sight with all of his donations and stuff. That you're hiding in plain sight, and you intentionally put yourself in a place where, well, nobody would question my motives because I'm, giving toys to the needy, right? And sociopaths will embed themselves in those places and they will take advantage of people. This is true of the church. This is true of nonprofits in general. And listen, it's true of the for-profit world. Sociopaths will embed themselves in ways and then try to obscure motives. And this is why our brains, I think, get that signal when we think somebody, when we're getting the feeling from somebody that I don't believe you, you're saying one thing, but you're another. Like, I guess the word hypocrite comes up here also. Like, just alarm bells go off and it's like, not safe person, do not trust. And so anyway, I think there's been plenty of that.
And there's a difference between, so I think, Mike, where a company like yours or ours is different is we started out this way. And I think what you're kind of alluding to or pointing to is that a lot of sort of like large corporate America or large corporate global just sort of adopted this idea of purpose and mission in the last 5 to 10 years. That doesn't mean that all the time it was misplaced, but I would say that, like, I agree. I think the vast majority of the time it's probably misused and misplaced, and that they would be better off just being honest. And I think the consumer is generally pretty aware of this stuff now.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
I think so. The one example I think that is kind of the height of hypocrisy, and I may be, Papa John's may be catching a stray here. Maybe it wasn't Papa John's. I think it was. I read about a situation where it was a $50,000 donation they were making, but then they spent $1 million on the marketing campaign talking about the donation.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that doesn't smell right at all. And I think that that's what most people think of is like, okay, you're going to give, a penny and you're going to spend $1 talking about giving a penny. And so like you're saying, Matt, this has been embedded in who we are since the very beginning. And that's pretty different than, all of a sudden a bit, ExxonMobil getting religion about the environment, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I don't know that I believe you. I kind of think this is because of your oil spills and you kind of feel like this is a good way to counteract, the negative narratives.
Dude, I don't know if you know this, but I think ExxonMobil at one point was a top 5 ESG scored company on the planet. That's why that was so busted.
Yeah, ESG is crazy. Anytime you have a score, people can, and I think Tesla scored really low on ESG or something. Like, it's just kind of silly that when you create these metrics and people will game the system for those metrics. So it's definitely a thing that's out there, and I think that this goes back to why your purpose has to be bigger than how customers will react to it, because you can't control that, right? Like maybe it makes them more likely to buy your product. Maybe it locks them in, or maybe not. Maybe it actually makes them more wary and could be a little bit of a turnoff. Would you still do it if it meant you made less money? And this is actually like a really clarifying idea to me. Okay, so we all have what we would consider to be our values, what matters to us. But we also know that we will often have a very poor ability to assess our own motives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I have a narrative I want to tell myself about why I reacted that way to my wife or in that situation over there. And obviously the narrative I have is one that I'm a great guy. I'm the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Even if the situation wasn't good, it was like, well, it was contextual. If you really understood, like I'm the good guy. And we tell ourselves these stories about what we value and about who we are. And I'm convinced that the absolute most devastating lies are the ones that we tell ourselves about ourselves. When I ascribe motives to myself that aren't really my motives. And this is actually like a really interesting idea, is that sometimes we get more insight into other people and what's driving them and what's motivating them than what's motivating ourselves. So here's the question. How do you see through the fog? How do you get through your own PR department, your own Baghdad Bob that's inside feeding you information about how you're so great? How do you see through that? And I actually think one of the litmus tests is, if you say you value something, can you point to making sacrifices on behalf of that thing? And if you can't, then you don't really value it. It's just PR that you're believing about yourself.
Yeah.
So this is a great way to illustrate the point. Does your mission matter to you enough that if you made less money, that you'd keep doing it, right? That if it socially led to less applause or even more, consternation, would you still do it? There's a great tweet thread. This person was a professor of 18th century or 17th, 19th century U.S. history, so like 1800s, right? And mostly they would talk about Reconstruction, abolitionism, all of this different stuff having to do with slavery. And anyway, the person was saying, it's interesting. Every year, I've got a fresh class of students, and I'll ask them at the beginning of class, how many of you think you would be abolitionists if you lived, whatever, in the 1830s, 40s, 50s? And she's like, it's amazing. Every year, 90-something% of the class is convinced that they would have been an abolitionist. But we know that they're a very small percentage of the actual population. So what gives? And what she would tell her students is, here's how you'll know if you actually would have been an abolitionist. Can you point to specific examples in your life of believing in something so strongly that you took a stand that cost you money, cost you friends, cost you family, cost you social standing? And if the answer is no, then you would not have been an abolitionist.
Right.
And so anyway, I think this idea is a really powerful one that we can use of just being able to assess what we really value. Comes from being able to look at examples of actually making sacrifices for those things.
100% agree.
Postscript is the only SMS solution you should be using as a brand store owner because their sole focus is on SMS. They're the biggest innovators in the space, and their latest launch of Postscript AI is proof of this. I got to see the demo a couple months back and immediately wanted in on the beta. And over the course of a 4-week period, Postscript generated, for Ridge, over $124,000 in AI-driven revenue. We used a holdout, so I can confidently say 12,000 of that is purely incremental. A 9% lift in browse abandonment, 14% on checkout, and our best performing abandoned cart flow had a 29% lift on click-through rate and a 21% lift on earnings per message. Should I say that again, but maybe a little slower? 12,000 in incremental revenue, a 9% lift on our browse abandonment, 14% lift on our checkout abandonment, and a 21% lift on our abandoned cart automation. And the work from our team was close to zero to generate these numbers. There's two things about Postscript AI that I'm personally really excited about. One is Brand Center. It's the central nucleus of all of their AI message testing. We get to feed them exactly how we want to sound, what words to say, avoid, who we want our personas to be, and tune that over time to make sure our AI-generated messaging is on brand as much as possible. I think Brand Center will power messaging everywhere potentially. Right now, we've just got it in our SMS flows, but I think it could go a lot more places. The second one is now that you've got this Brand Center, you can do infinity testing. So you can imagine maybe once, twice, 3 times a quarter, we're setting up an A/B test to understand, is this message better than this one? Infinity testing does that in the background constantly, testing hundreds and thousands of variations to identify the optimal messaging given each flow. When I first heard this described, it immediately made me think that A/B testing feels very archaic. So I'm incredibly excited about both Brand Center and Infinity testing. So if you're in D2C marketing, you need to check this out. They've completely transformed how the team at Ridge is approaching SMS. Go to postscript.io/AI to learn more.
One of the downsides or one of the tricky areas of being a business that has a strong sort of purpose and mission is when it comes to your own team and culture. So like one of the things that we noticed, this is probably, what year are we in? 2024. So like right in peak COVID, like 2020, 2021, we sort of noticed that the company started to adopt every cause as like, we care about it all now. Right.
Yeah.
And I found that Pila was like, we were running things for, Pride Month, and then we were running things for like BLM. And then because we had people on the team that like put their hand up and said, we really care about this. We want to do something as a brand to support it. And eventually it got to the point where I was like, look, I think if you want to go and work on those things because you feel so passionately about them, you should go and do that. But this is not the place for that. Like,
man,
we have our
and
own.
This is so relevant, Matt. This is so relevant because right now I think we're at a moment in time where people are trying to figure this out. We've had, and let's kind of deconstruct how we got here. The tech industry basically adopted this "come here and change the world"
Yeah.
kind of mantra. I mean, I think that might have actually been the exact
That's
pitch.
it. That's it. They still
right?
say it.
Yeah, come here to change the world. But there's two problems with that. Number one is change the world is like very undefined, right? And so like, hey, a return to slavery would be changing the world, not a good one,
Yeah.
right? What do you mean by change the world? And it sounds really positive, but if you leave it open, you could get people with some very, very different views of what changing the world looks like that are like, yeah, I'm here to change the world. And then they are going to have all out war when they're on the same team together. The second problem with that is you cannot, in one organization, impact many things, right? You can be passionate about kind of one thing, maybe two, and maybe do those well. I mean, it's hard enough to, you and I know this, it's hard enough to run an organization where you impact one thing and you actually make some kind of dent in the universe. The idea that you're going to impact a lot of things. And so what you got is you got these companies like Google that recruited a bunch of people and were like, hey, come change the world. And they had very different views of what changing the world looked like. And then you came in and you said, everything's on the table. And then all of a sudden it's like every election, it's like all out war, or, okay, there's an issue in Gaza and there's all out internal war. And so you've had this response, I think, this kind of, let's just say 2020, 2021 was like peak this, right? Where it was just crazy.
It was insane.
Like, and you and I have talked to so many leaders in the business world where it was like, it was just a disaster. Our company Slack was a disaster, right? Because of this. And then you had the second wave, which I think we're in right now, which is this like, we're a business. We don't care about anything but being a business. And don't bring your politics, don't bring your world changing, don't bring any of that to work. I mean, you can have that, but you're not bringing that in here. Our team's about performance and we're about making money or whatever, which I think is a miss on the other way. I mean, one way of thinking about this is that like the right approach, I'm convinced, is that you have a clear and focused mission. And then the ditch on either side is mission scope creep, which is what you're really talking about. It's like, hey, we're not just about a wasteless future. We're about a future with more equality and more rights for everybody.
Yes.
And, economic, eliminating economic inequality. And before you know it, it's like a, we are the world, stanza where it doesn't even make any sense. It's not even possible anymore. The other ditch is this idea that organizations don't have a responsibility to impact the world, and where it's just like the entire KPI is how much money do we make?
Yeah.
And I think both of them are misses. But to keep that middle ground, you have to define scope clearly, and you have to keep it narrow. You can't let scope creep happen, and people will push on scope creep all the time. So, like as an example, with your company, I'm sure you've dealt with this. They're like, oh, we want a wasteless future, but how does a wasteless future even matter if we don't have equality in this area?
Dude, yeah.
And
this is what I found myself apologizing to my team for our own mission and vision and like what we were up to. Like it wasn't good enough, right? Like that, like somehow if we're not trying to fix all the problems, we're somehow like bad all of a sudden. And I agree. I think we kind of came to this head, like, I think this was like my co-founder, Brad, and I chatting about this and he very bravely raised it. He's like, dude, I think we need to put a stop to all of these conversations. And like, we need to take a hard line stance at like, we have this very narrow scope, to use your word, of like what matters to us and why we're here. And we're not saying that those other things don't matter. They just don't matter here. Right? It's just not what we're putting like 100% of our focus on as a business. And that like, we respect if you want to take that passion for this other thing and go somewhere else. Like, great. You should work on things that matter to you. You'll never hear me say otherwise. But I found myself in this position where as the CEO, as the leader, you almost felt bad that like you were not supporting your team in these things that they were very clearly very interested in. And then it's actually like, think of it as a leader, it's a really hard line to walk, like with the words you're going to say, like showing up in front of 100 people and saying, look, like, and very politely and very like, you're trying to find a way to say, just don't give a shit about any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I really don't. Like, I can't.
Well, and it's
you
not that you
can't.
don't care about any of the other stuff, but it's like within the context of your
In the
position and the
business.
organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I've got views about political things. I've got views about all these other things, but like in here, I'm about one thing,
Yes.
and that is our mission.
Yeah. I think you've seen. I think you're right. I think there's been a bunch of companies who like take this. They're sort of like confusing the message. I think Toby actually did a pretty decent job at Shopify. Like, they have a very clear mission, right? Like, this is what we're here for. And Toby had to like draw a hard line there and say, like, we got to bring it back to the center, guys.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we're here for. Then you had other people where they went right over to that other ditch where it was just pure, unadulterated capitalism. It's like, we're just here to make a dollar for our shareholder. If you, the shareholder, want to invest in some cause, you do that on your own time. And then like, don't bring your beliefs and your whatever else, like your beliefs and your ideals and all that stuff to work, Mr. and Mrs. Employee. Okay. You can't do that, which I think is such an unreasonable ask. Like I don't know if people know this, but like, none of us are superheroes. We don't like put a cape on to go to work. We don't like leave a personality and identity behind at home. I don't go to work and be like, okay, I don't have kids. How am I going to behave right now? Like, I just can't do that. Like, I'm not married. How am I going to behave right now? So you can't ask people to reasonably leave behind their own identity. But as a leader and as a business, if you have a strong mission and you have narrow scope, you do have to find a way to like get people lined up and rowing towards that thing, right? And it might only be like 10% of their identity is over here versus like somebody else in the same team could be 90% of their identity is like, I'm a friggin' tree hugger. There's no other way to describe me. I support everything that's in that world. Right. So you have this spectrum of people, yet you're trying to have like that spectrum of people and their beliefs and everything that makes them up all line up to one thing, which makes this choice less easy than just saying, I'm here to make money in many ways, like not in all, but in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about using money as the scoreboard is it's concrete and it's just very straightforward. And that's the reason I think a lot of companies default to like, that's the only thing that matters, is just because like, hey, like, there's not a lot of debate about how much gross profit we made yesterday. It's like, it's just math. Whereas anytime you have any kind of qualitative aspects to your mission, like it's open for interpretation, it's open for different perspectives. So for sure. Now, one thing I will say, you mentioned this earlier, but we've actually gotten to the point where mission is a big part of how we lead and we recruit. I'd say mission and values. And I think we've hit a tipping point. Maybe we hit it a while ago where I'd say the vast majority of applicants, they're applying because of the culture and because of the mission. Like basically what they've heard, they're like, I want to be a part of that particular team because of the experience that I've heard from people that have worked on the team and have been in that culture and environment. And that's one way that it can be really powerful, having a very strong, unique identity and mission, is that it becomes a magnet for a particular type of person, which is exactly what you're trying to do. This is also, I'll say, that my most cancelable take, like if I ever did run for office, like this is what would get me canceled, is saying this. But our culture is obsessed with this idea of diversity, but I'm not convinced that's how humans actually work. I think that what humans do is they group around shared something.
100%.
And that's basically how we organize our lives. And that we've kind of worshipped at the altar of diversity. Diversity is always good. You know what? It's not always good. Like, especially diversity of a belief is not good in an organization. Like, the research on this is really clear, right? So for example, our company's mission is we exist to give generously. If you work at our company, part of what you're signing up for is this idea that the world is better when we share with others. And so you will make less money here than you could because we're going to give. If you're not excited about the idea of generosity, then you're not going to like it here. And we're not going to like having you here. And we don't need diversity. around that perspective.
Right.
And there's a lot of different, like if you think getting things done quick is more important than doing your best, your absolute best at things, then you're not gonna like it here very much. And so anyway, like whatever your company, it's like excellence is another one of our core values, but whatever your core values are and your core mission are, I actually think those are the filtering mechanism for you to be able to say, hey, this 98% of the population is not a good fit for us, or 95% or whatever, because we actually are excluding everybody who is not passionate and excited about these things. I think one of the reasons why you've seen this really big push towards like, oh, it's diversity, 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 is that the main messaging companies are these huge monolithic companies like Amazon that have 2 million employees. And it's like, well, when you have 2 million employees, then it's just like, yeah, you're just there is no real mission alignment anymore. Like you're just gathering tons and tons of people. But for our company, it's like we're 100 people. And there is no way we can ever have even a fraction of us as focused or successful a company if we're gathering people that aren't completely laser aligned on the same ideas.
We it's so funny you bring this up. I actually don't think it should be a cancelable take, but it is because it's true. We as a company are a B Corp, right? And when you're a B Corp, they come in and you've got to you go through this whole assessment on a whole bunch of vectors, right? That's how they evaluate your business. It's like as a benefit corp. We barely qualify as a benefit corp. That blows me away, right? It's like,
yeah,
our business forever has barely qualified because for a long time, I think we're better now, but for a long time, we did not score high on diversity.
Right.
And my conversation and my business partner, Jeremy, his conversation with the B Corp folks, and they're great, is we think there's a flaw in your scoring system because we can't. I don't know if you've looked up where we live, but the population of our city is not diverse, at all. It's like a 200,000 person city with zero diversity, damn near zero.
Right.
So for you to say well, you should have a more diverse team, we were sort of sitting there. We're like, well, but how? Everybody we hire is here. We've got a manufacturing facility here, a warehouse here. Everybody looks the same and talks the same and walks the same here, man. We don't have diversity.
Yeah.
But we're getting penalized for this one vector. So I think you're right. I think that that's probably why Tesla also got bad scores for ESG at some point. What do you think of this idea that for you exist to give generously? Do you believe that having strong purpose, strong mission as a business will lead to a more profitable company over time?
Absolutely. 100%. Not even close. And one of the reasons I believe that is, it's interesting. Jeff Bezos, who, I wouldn't describe as a spiritual person, I don't think. But one of his favorite things to say is that there's two types of people. There's missionaries and mercenaries.
Mm-hmm.
And mercenaries are driven by what can I get out? They're what we'll call extrinsically motivated. And missionaries are driven by intrinsic motivations. What am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do in the world? And that missionaries destroy mercenaries over time is his perspective. And we could look at business case after business case after business case that tells the exact same story. One of the reasons why it's true, which you mentioned earlier, is that missionaries are able to endure hardship so much better. They will go through the crap because the reason that they're in it is not what they're going to get out of it, but because what they believe in. And so what they're willing to endure, what they're willing to go through. But another big part of this is that missionaries have endurance, and the compounding that can happen in teams really happens with them. I'm convinced that one of the most broken parts of the business culture in corporate America is that, for me, my executive team, I have been with them since the beginning. And when I hired many of them, 14 out of the 15 people that I hired at the beginning of the company, I'd known for a decade or more, which means that today, all of my executive team, I have about 2 decades with. Do you have any idea how that impacts our trust for each other?
No
Do you have
kidding.
any idea how that makes decision-making, conflict resolution easier? right? It's impossible to quantify. Charlie Munger once said, when the worst thing you can do when you're experiencing compounding is interrupt it. And I use this analogy a lot, but like the Golden State Warriors, when they were on their big run, like obviously Curry is amazing, and they had Thompson and they had Green. They had great players. But you know what? Other NBA teams have great players. Part of what made them special was that they played together for whatever it was, 10, 11, 12 years. And the chemistry they developed, where they knew where each other were going to be on the floor, where they understood roles. They understood, hey, when the defense does this, we're going to counter with this. And if they counter with that, then we've got another counter for the counter. Like that's the kind of stuff that great teams in business, in sports are able to do, is they're able to develop this continuity and chemistry. And that just takes time. And so it's more than just, can you get talented people? Can you get talented people who are excited about your thing? It's, can you keep them to get to the things that are only possible 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 years in? All the great teams have that characteristic. Yes, they have talent, but they also have this continuity chemistry piece. And I'm convinced that the mission helps you to build those kinds of environments and teams.
Yeah, I think there's a great quote from Yvon Chouinard, who's like the founder of Patagonia, which might be one of the best examples of mission-driven business that's just done insane things, right? And in consumer, like,
and they're not for everybody. Going back to that point earlier about like diversity, they don't want people who aren't passionate about the environment. Like they would, I think they would self-identify as, we are as far out on the spectrum on this, our beliefs about the environment as anybody. And if you don't hold these, this isn't the place for you, right?
Dude, he's literally on the record saying, every time I've made a decision about that's best for the planet, I've made money, right? Like he's so narrow in his focus. I think even when he was leaving sort of like operationally the company, they had changed its mission slightly to be, we're here to protect our home planet. Almost as like a counter to SpaceX, where it's like, we're trying to save the human species by like going to other planets. Patagonia took the stance of like, no, like we've got a perfectly good planet right now.
Man, it's such a great point, Matt. It's so good that it's like, those are divergent views, right? Like both of them are like, hey, we've got to worry about the future and what does humanity look like in the future? And one of them is like, the only way to do it is to protect this planet. And another one is like, we've got to develop the technology to go to other planets. And like both those organizations can thrive, but those are very different and they're for very different people. One's going to be highly technical STEM, let's go to the stars. And the other one is going to be very earthy granola. Let's stay right here. Let's stay grounded. The answer is not out there. It's right here. And this is the nature of why you can build a great organization around so many different perspectives. The important thing is it clear? Is it compelling what it is that you're standing for?
Yeah. And put another way, the way I had a friend of mine say this once, and I don't remember where he got it from, but I'm sure it's popular, but this idea that if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. Right. And
absolutely.
Companies need to really identify what do they stand for. And if you're a marketer listening to this, if you want to talk about like growing TAM, like how do I take a business and grow TAM? You should probably stand for something. And in everything that you put out there, you're like, you make it clear that this is who this is for. Right. And
I'll make one more. Here's one more point. We've been wrapping on. I mean, gosh, we could go probably for 2 hours on this topic, but I want to make one more point, which is you have your company and then you have a personal brand. And as an entrepreneur, the easiest way to be successful is for people to believe in you and your personal brand. It impacts hiring and fundraising and sales and everything you could possibly imagine. Comes back to when people think of you and your personal brand, how do they respond to it? And I think having a strong sense of purpose in your person, there's probably nothing more powerful you can do for your personal brand than having a strong sense of, this is what I think is good and is right, and this is what I'm going to stand for. It will absolutely draw people to you. I had a conversation a few weeks ago. Someone that she works at Sam's Club. She was the first buyer to ever buy a Simple Modern product.
Cool.
she bought from me when we had sold literally thousands of water bottles. Like, I mean, we were so small. She bought a very big program. And I was talking to her recently, and just every time I talk to her, I thank her because she was a big part of the company becoming what it is. That order that she made allowed me to, have the financial runway to start to hire people. And anyway, I was thanking her for it yet again, telling her that our story is, she plays a critical role in it. And one of the things she said that I really I loved is she said, I believed in the product, but even more than that, I believed in you.
Mm.
And this is what building a business is all about. It's not just do people believe in your mission, it's do they believe in you? And when they do, it naturally, it turns into sales. It turns into products that people buy. It turns into great teams. And so even more than creating an organization with a sense of purpose, when you personally have a clear sense of purpose, it's probably the single greatest thing you can do to be a compelling leader.
Yep. 100%. I think that's the pod, man. Let's leave it there.
That was great, man.
Yep. Super fun.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Once again, special shout out to our sponsors, Fulfill, Northbeam, and Postscript. See you next time.